Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Homeland Security Today's series to recognize January, which is Human Trafficking Awareness Month. We're very, very excited today to speak with Deputy Prosecuting Attorney Kevin Metcalf of the 4th Judicial District of Arkansas, not only because of his great work that he does during his day job, but he's also the founder of the National Child Protection Task Force, NCPTF. And we first met Kevin back when we gave him an award many years ago for his tremendous work, seeing the challenges that law enforcement and the judicial system have to catch human traffickers and really starting something to do something about it. So he has helped countless agencies identify and apprehend sexual predators and recover children. And he just keeps beating that drum. And so we're very, very excited to welcome you here with us, Kevin.
Oh, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. It's been great to be with you, and learned a lot from you over the years, and really appreciate your support.
Well, I appreciate that. I mean, you are, one of Homeland Security Today's heroes around the country. And it's amazing how many people are working on this particular challenge. I mean, we work all across the disciplines in Homeland, but trafficking is such a tough one. It's very hard to find the resources to combat it. It's very hard to organize everything. And you are just a tremendous force for the country. So tell us a little bit about you and how you got into it.
Okay, a little about me. Went through, to tell you how old I am, went through basic training in the military in the Army back in 1988. So I've been in one uniform or another since then, primarily heavily law enforcement. So I've worked state, local, federal, military law enforcement, and I left federal law enforcement around 2007, I think, and for some weird reason went to law school. And and I worked part-time in law enforcement as I went through law school. After I came out of law school, my background was heavily in counterterrorism and a lot of the things that we really focus on, which drug investigations, the terrorism stuff, and all that. When I came through law school, I really had no idea. Wasn't thinking about technology, wasn't thinking about child crimes or anything like that. And I had my girls by myself at that time. And when I started law school, they were 2 and 5 years old, and I was the only parent. So I went through law school like that, which actually was a kind of an eye-opening experience also about dealing with children as a single parent. I had them 24/7, trying to work, trying to go to school, trying to do all that. It was, and that was an eye-opening experience, I have to say. But coming out of that, I went to state prosecution with a local prosecutor's office here, and I was looking around, and after that, I had 20 years, over 20 years, in all of this other law enforcement, and I'm the new guy. So I was looking around at where I could do something meaningful, and it happened to be technology. Even now, prosecution still doesn't grasp, I think, the technology, how it fits in very well. So, and at that time, it really wasn't. Everybody was shying away from social media, from computers, from cell phones, and all that. I thought, I know something about investigating it. So I jumped in on the prosecution side, and what I found was really eye-opening. I started seeing what technology was doing to our children, and what it does to our elderly. And you even see seasoned IT professionals get hit. They even get hit in technology. So when you look at kids, they're extremely vulnerable. And that really became my focus after a time. And I believe there was a case in 2016 where I had a sexual predator. He was on the sex offenders list registration in Michigan, I think. He moved down to Arkansas, got married, and took his wife's last name and was trying just to disappear. His new wife, though, happened to walk behind him one day and saw on his computer screen child sexual abuse material, and a domestic violence encounter came out of that. Understandably, she was just shocked and horrified and reported it. And I took the case, and there were images in there of things that were just so horrible. just terribly horrible. And one of the things people don't realize, he was connecting with, we the child pornography term I really hate because it makes people think, well, this is like maybe like Playboy or maybe like somebody taking a picture of their kid in the bathtub. And it's not like that. It's the rape and sexual abuse of children. And the investigators now are when you go through training, they're told turn that sound off. Do not have that volume up unless you absolutely have to, because that's not something you can get through. Well, this back in 2016 was as an experience, but I want to say that there are moms out here, there are mothers who have single moms who have kids that are actively looking for predators to share these kids with. And that's what he was doing. He was engaging in that community. So anyway, the jury here convicted him and gave him 540 years or something like that. So that was an eye-opening experience for me. And that was really what kind of kicked this journey off into child crimes. Now, you and I were talking earlier, and you said my LinkedIn profile, I've got, what was that, bridging technology and criminal justice or something like that. So I really got into focus on how technology is used by criminals. And in order to get really good at something, you have to have a lot of repetitions. It's like exercising or working out. And the only way I could figure out how to do that was to get myself involved in every crime type. So property crimes, homicides. I couldn't tell you how many homicides I've worked. Terrorism cases, anything where technology is an element, is a part of it. And that spans, organized retail crime, whatever you can imagine. But the focus has been on human trafficking, child exploitation, sextortion, rape by proxy, and sex trafficking, of course, gets involved in that. So those are kind of the big priorities where we're going. So hopefully I didn't ramble on too much.
No. We're here to talk to you and listen to your story. What you're saying resonated so much. Had the honor of going through the FBI Citizens Academy. And one of the presentations was all about child pornography. And the thing that struck me most was how they said, when it was paper and it was photos, they had almost busted all of the rings distributing these horrible photos. And then the internet came along. And then it blew up, and just the stories they told, and the way that the investigators have to really get these pedophiles and these people to trust them in order to really learn as much as they need to break down these networks. I just left that particular piece of that FBI Citizens Academy class just horrified, because like you said, having to watch that, and just coincidentally, I was on an airplane and watched the Sound of Freedom just the other day, and having him have to make friends with these people is gotta be like just this skin crawling experience, and yet you have to do it repeatedly. So I just admire the grit, and I admire you speaking a little more frankly about how terrible these crimes are, because I think you're right. I think people think of it as some pictures or some whatever, but it's much more horrible than that. So so tell us a little bit about the internet blowing up, people being able to connect over their pedophilia. How do you break down those networks, or how do you find them, and what's your role in that?
So my role is, so you mentioned I was the founder of the NCPTF, and that came about, and I left there earlier this year. I felt like I had done as much as I could, and I was feeling really restricted because you have an organization, you're bounded by certain things, and you've known me long enough to know I don't like having boundaries. So I felt like I was locked in. I needed to advance more. So I left that behind and left that with some good people, and move forward, because I really want to take everything I had learned doing that and keep moving forward in this fight. But I'm sorry, what was the question you asked? I got sidetracked there.
Well, no, it's about how you are bridging that technology.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
So that when I was prosecuting that case, it was very tough because the investigation wasn't and it wasn't just this investigation. There were several investigations where I saw that were slipping through the cracks, and there are countless others we're not even identifying. And the investigators are still struggling, and there are many reasons for that. But at that time, I was looking, and technology creates so many challenges for us. In law enforcement, we still like to treat everything in silos, just like, this is the fingerprint silo, the DNA silo, which kind of makes sense. But law enforcement still wants to do, oh, this is a technology silo, another technology silo, but there are actually interconnections on these. You should be able to pivot from one to another. And I hate to say it, I'm a founding board member of Raven. So we look at the legal issues really focused on ICAC investigations, internet crimes against children. And if you look at the war on drugs, the drug industry, the drug investigations, I may be off on this, but I think it's $550 billion, like well over $500 billion going towards drug investigations. Do you know how much goes towards crimes against children, internet crimes against children? 60 million. And that's not always fully distributed. And that's for the entire country. So looking at that, you've got ICAC commanders out here trying to do their best, and they're overwhelmed by cyber tips that keep flooding in. And these cyber tips have to be triaged. So how much proactive investigation can they do? So keeping that in mind, I started looking at this, and one of the things that hit me when I was sitting across from these victims, sometimes they were adults at this time by the time that they were identified, and that we get these cases going. And I remember them saying, my childhood ended when the abuse started at 6, 7, 8 years old. Can you imagine your childhood ending when you're 6 years old or 5 or whenever? And that really, really hit me. And I was thinking, we have to save childhood, and we have to do it right now. We have to do these investigations better. We have to do them faster, and we have to keep pushing forward. And one of my favorite quotes, Abraham Lincoln said, give me 6 hours to chop down a tree, I'll spend 4 hours sharpening my axe. The emphasis there on being, you have to develop your skills. You have to develop the ability to do something, and you have to keep your tools sharp, or you're not going to do the job very well. And that's why, I started working in everything I could. And at the time I'd worked, back around 2017, with the NCPTF, it was just me for several years. I was the only guy. And then it went to 4 of us. And, my wife being one of them, one of the original 4. But this experience, when I reached out to about 3 or 4 agencies, I said, hey, I can help. I've been doing some things. I got some experience. So with those, we recovered about 4 girls from online sexual predators that were, at that point, you had federal agencies had been involved for several days or a week or more. And, within hours of me getting involved, we were able to recover these girls. And that pushed me out into national attention at that point. So speaking everywhere, I had people like Cy Ray with ZX who reached out, talked to him. He said, you need any help, let me know. He donated licenses and help and support. And I picked up these experts over the years that just wanted to volunteer. And then I started getting these vendors with data and these platforms. And I quickly figured out all I had to do was to get their help. And we recovered 1 child, and they were hooked. So that expertise. And then also there's a professor, Darren Hayes, out of Pace University, forensic professor. So we also reach out to academics, and he has been very, very insightful. He and I are actually working on something to present in London coming up here in a few months. But keeping the broad spectrum of people, and then also listening to victims. We have survivors out here like Jessica Lamb with Atlanta Redemption Inc., the work that she's doing, and just sitting and listening to her and her stories and her insight opens up a lot more for me to understand behaviors. So when you're looking at technology and bridging this gap, you have to understand technology, you have to understand the law, and you have to understand criminal behavior and also victim behavior. And how does all this fit together? And we can't get into too much on this because that's getting into tradecraft, and we have to keep that separate.
Absolutely. You said something earlier, and I thought, oh, he's my spirit animal of not wanting to be too kind of caged in. Yet you could consider your profession, a lawyer, literally the bars of the cage. So tell us a little bit more about how you so in DC, we call the lawyers either they're the get us to yes lawyers or they're the no, no, no lawyers. And I deal with both, dealing with federal clients. Tell us about how you get to yes when it comes to prosecuting these folks, because you're still operating within the law. You're just getting to yes as opposed to throwing up no, no, no all the time.
Yeah, yes. So I actually had to talk to a psychologist, actually a couple, on for various things. One of them made the point saying that you have a pattern of whenever you hit a roadblock or some barrier or somebody tries to stop you, including some of these agencies, you either go through them or around them. And I have to say, law school and the legal profession, your job is to be a zealous advocate for your client, which means looking for loopholes, looking for gray areas, looking for places that can bend. And quite honestly, you can be held in, you're looking at malpractice if you don't. So, people call lawyers vultures and all this other, but there is a reason, in the licensing and all that. So the legal front, and one of the things that I have really seen is a lack of understanding. So if you understand the legal framework and you think you understand human trafficking or child exploitation, let's say child exploitation, for example, and you think of it as Playboy or pictures of some grandparents taking pictures of a kid in the tub and that picture's going out. You don't understand what it is you're dealing with, and you don't understand how it fits into the legal framework. Or if you think of human trafficking as somebody who goes out here in the movie Taken, and they go out here and kidnap these girls and take them to a place, and that's where they're being sold, then you don't understand the nuances. You don't understand how poverty plays in, how some of these uh, girls are left without a choice. And there's so many variations on this. I just spent the last few days with Ben Owen and Joe Scaramucci, and just listening to their stories and to their experiences. I actually learned so much here in the last few days from those two, that prosecutors absolutely have to get out. They need to be on the street riding with law enforcement. They need to be on the scene of some of these to see what happens, to see what addiction looks like, to see why when these drugs are used to control these victims, to control the girls that are victimized out here, that maybe we identify and I got to say, my good friends in Mississippi have really put this in my head. Ashley Lucas, Heather Collins, and Guy Collins. That we don't say we recovered victims, because you see this all over the place. Recovering from child exploitation is one thing. That's when we got to go in and recover that child. But recovering human trafficking victims is another thing. We can identify them and we can offer them help, but they're going to have to really take those steps and engage. But we need to be there to offer, what they need. So anyway, it's so varied and so difficult to understand the nuances in this. That gives me an advantage because I can articulate within the boundaries of the law, because I understand this problem so much more deeply. And I'm not even close to people like David Weiss or maybe Joe Remy. Those two are those are my mentors. Those are the guys I go to for Robert Peters. I've got people on the prosecution side that are far better than me that I go to when I get stuck and I say, what do you think of this? And I think that's the key. And that's one of the things that we need to educate prosecutors on in this country, worldwide, but especially in this country, on understanding the problem and the issues and how that fits into the framework of the law.
So that was kind of a lawyerly answer, actually. No.
Well,
No, but I understand. It's getting to, that's how you get to yes. That's how you get through, is you really
Yes.
understand the challenge, and then you match the law to figuring out the prosecution. It's a skill.
Yeah. So the runaway loophole. I know I've spoken on that in various places. I don't know if you and I have spoken about it, but one of the things that I've seen, and somebody brought up statistics again to me. I absolutely hate statistics because one federal agency will have their statistics, another one have theirs. This NGO will have theirs. None of them match. It's just not quite as helpful. But some of the things that I've seen are, and this is something I've seen over and over and over and over. We know that the predators are out here, traffickers are out here, and they are grooming children. One of the things technology has allowed is for them to reach far more children. It's just like Amazon. Compare Amazon. We used to have five and dime hunts. We used to have the local hardware store. All that's gone. Walmart hit heavy, but when Amazon came in, technology, you could sit on your couch watching TV, drinking a beer, and order whatever you need off your phone. Heavy hitting. Same thing with technology. When technology is a double-edged sword, same thing with predators, with criminals. They figure out how to use technology to their advantage, and they can reach out anywhere. But with the runaway loophole, all parents know you can go out here and ask anybody about, if you're a parent, your kid has one of these things or a tablet or a gaming system, you'll say, oh yeah, we got to be really careful about predators on there. They're going to groom our kids and then our kids are going to be gone. Predators know this. So you're not going to have the movie Taken where they come out here and snatch these kids. They groom these children and then make them run away. And I use Phoenix Police. If you want to Google Phoenix Police runaway, they have their policy right out there. And it's not just their policy. They just articulate it. They don't hide it. Running away is not a crime. It's up to the parent or guardian of that child to find the child, meaning it's not law enforcement's responsibility to go find a runaway. And that's how a lot of agencies look at this. Yes, they're entered into NCIC, but the only way they're found is if somebody happens to run that kid at some point and then they're found. Predators know all of this. They have dark web manuals on how to avoid these investigations, how to avoid prosecution, how to get by with doing what they want to do. So they make these manuals and they share. And that's what they do very, very well. So this runaway loophole, we have 18 USC 2702, which allows service providers to provide information to law enforcement under an emergency. And most law enforcement agencies out here will tell you if this is a runaway, this isn't really an emergency. The kids aren't really in danger. We're blaming the victim. We're saying, no, it's on them. And we completely disregard, we silo, that we don't connect grooming with this running away, but we see it time and time again. So then you got to ask the question, or is a 12-year-old or a 5-year-old, or let's say a 12-year-old. Is a 12-year-old safer after they leave their guardian or their parent? And even with that, some of the service providers, they will only allow us to get emergency information for 3 days. And then they say, oh, the child is no longer in danger. It's been more than 3 days. So yeah, that's exactly it. So there are a lot of legal nuances where, as a prosecutor, I can go in and articulate different things. And my investigators know very, very well, because we do training on that here, how to articulate, what to expect, and how to do that. But in the US, you got about 18,000 different jurisdictions, different kingdoms, and everybody wants to do things their own way. And I think that's one of the things that the situations like this interview, getting us out to the public, we need to think about things a little differently. And we need prosecutors to understand that running away is not something that we should blame the victim for. There's probably an underlying reason. There's probably something there. You got the push-pull. So, and I'm rambling again, but just want to say it's the lack of understanding and the lack of being able to articulate a situation within the legal structure. That's why, that's a big problem. And that's why I get by with, I don't want to say get by. That's why I have the ability to do more. It's just because I understand and I can articulate.
Absolutely. Well, and I think what you're talking about really is many times, like even human trafficking awareness, I think you and I were both engaged in a conversation around whether months like this help. And some people
Right.
say, oh, it should be all the time. But, I made the comment that you can't be focused on it 24/7, and educating people is so important. And yet there's this fine line of kind of education fatigue, because
Yes.
you hear about these things all the time, and eventually you do become numb. I mean, it's just human nature. If you can live on the
Absolutely.
Gaza Strip, if you can live in Israel, if you can live in a war-torn area and get on with your life, you get used to whatever situation you're in. And so,
Right.
I mean, I think what you're talking about is people's inability to be, afraid. I always told my daughter, be prepared, not scared. So
Right.
I mean, that's kind of what you're talking about, to be prepared. So as I'm listening to you, you see a lot, and we are really trying to raise awareness, but we're also trying to educate in a constructive way. What are you seeing out there that you think that the public or someone watching this interview should really know about and take seriously, and maybe take that extra step to learn about?
As I said, I spent the last few days with Ben Owen and Joe Scaramucci, and
And can you just tell us who they are, just in case someone who
oh,
doesn't know? Yeah.
okay, Ben Owen. Yeah, I see that Ben's all over social media, so I think everybody knows Ben. Ben is someone I have a lot of respect for. He and his wife just 5 years ago were addicted and homeless, living on the streets in Memphis, and they are very, very open about that. They Ben failed out. He flunked out of drug court, flunked out of programs, and finally something triggered one day. He woke up and said, "I'm done with this." And they came out of that, started a successful business, have a nice house in Georgia, and they they have done so well for themselves. They could just be sitting at home, enjoying the good life, traveling, doing whatever they want. But what they've done is they grabbed resources and they went back to the streets of Memphis, and they went back there and they formed relationships, and they're buying these old crack houses and refurbishing and rebuilding them and making them halfway houses, making it a home where addicts, recovering addicts, or recovering some of the victims or the survivors from human trafficking can have a place to stay while they go through the program and get jobs and start getting their life together where they can move on and transition out to a real life. So that's Ben Owen, Ben and Jessica Owen. Joe Scaramucci is a detective, or he was a detective. He's still working there, but I think he retired from the sheriff's department in Waco. He's internationally known, but he has recently gone on the Skull Games with Jeff Teague and that crew, and they are doing a phenomenal job on counter human trafficking investigations and empowering law enforcement and really building the intelligence side of things. So those are the two that I've been around the last few days. We were doing some training in Little Rock for the Arkansas Attorney General's office, and we had agencies from Oklahoma, Louisiana, of course, Arkansas. We had multiple states there, and we've all come together to put our experience out there and to train law enforcement. So they made the trip in, made time from their busy schedules to come in here and do that. And for me, just being able to hang out with those two, it's so amazing. And their experiences are very different. And both of their experiences is very different than mine. And that's where the power comes in. We talk, we listen. We don't always agree on everything, but if we always agreed on everything, two of us would be worthless. So it's that power. But Ben's situation, he deals with addiction, and that's one of the things that he sees on a daily basis. There on the streets of Memphis is how do you deal with the trafficking issues if that person is addicted? Now, not all of the people being trafficked, and keep in mind that can be men and women, either one, but primarily women. There was got to be careful, law enforcement agency that picked up a teenage girl while we were there, and I heard them talking, and this teenage girl was being trafficked. They were taking her back for medical attention. She was not under arrest, taking her back for medical attention, and she bailed out of the car, out of a moving car, fractured her hip, and injured herself pretty good. But you got to think why. She wasn't under arrest. They were taking her to get treatment. But when you start looking at things, she had an addiction she was dealing with. And even if she wanted to get out of that life, that addiction is so powerful. The thought of withdrawal and all of or if you're dealing with opiates, fentanyl is a huge, massive problem. You're looking at physical addiction, the pain and the suffering and the anguish of going through that. I just can't do that. I got to go back. I got to go back to my pimp. I got to go back to the life. So it's not just as easy as saying, well, they need to make a decision to get out of this. In some ways, and how many Americans are still smoking that they want to quit smoking, but they can't? How many of us want to quit eating sugar? I mean, how many of us, we have a sugar addiction, we have smoking addictions, shopping addictions. How many of you are addicted to Amazon? You know, flipping through there, buying something. How many packages do you have coming to your house? There are things, there are process addictions like that. So, you know, we're quick to point fingers, but again, we don't understand the dynamics going on behind that. And you know, Scaramucci's got other, you know, other situations and other stories. And one of his was early on, he stumbled into trafficking just like I did. He said, I thought it'd be fun. I thought it'd be funny just to set up a sting. And he said, and then when we did that, I really got exposed to the reality, to the suffering, to what's going on. And then he's all in. So it's this awareness, it's the education. We have to educate ourselves as well.
So I guess the complexity is much more than it seems on the surface, because there are a lot of factors
Yes.
that work into trafficking, and that frankly traffickers can leverage, and they know who the vulnerable populations are. I mean, I know
Yes.
that I met Austin Shamlin, who we're talking to next.
Right.
I met him in Poland when we were over working in Ukraine.
Right.
And you know, they were there because war-torn populations, vulnerable people, and that's where traffickers prey. So it's amazing. Well, I just really am happy to share these few moments with you. I know what a busy man you are. We can't appreciate you enough. So I'm glad we found you many years ago. And as I said, you know, we'd love to have you leverage us to get the word out about your work as much as possible. So thank you so much for your time today.
Oh, thank you very much. I always enjoy talking to you.
Of course. And if our audience wants to learn more and stay on abreast of human trafficking issues, Homeland Security Today does have a vertical devoted to human trafficking, and we'll be launching a human trafficking newsletter this month so that we can keep everyone engaged and certainly informed of what other people are doing, because there are some great projects going on all around the country, and we really do need to unify and make sure that we're fighting this all together. So Kevin, thank you for being such a wonderful force in that mission, and we look forward to talking with you again. Thank you for joining us for Human Trafficking Awareness Month.
Well, thank you, Christina. I really appreciate it.